Dash was beginning to feel hopeless. She had checked everywhere she could think of, including all of her friends' houses, Everfree, and a quick peek in the clouds. During her search, she found nothing. Ponyville was deserted, and Dash was looking for one Pegasus among the thousands of ponies. Then she heard the boom. It scared the Pegasus half to death, as she covered her ears and let out a startled yelp, flapping her wings in defense. When she realized the noise had come from somewhere in the sky, she lowered her wings and continued walking. What the hell was that? She thought. It certainly wasn't thunder. She just happened to glance over at the mountain that Canterlot resided upon, and noticed flashes of purple and black that seemed to come from the sky. She knew it must be magical, and the caster would have to be powerful for the light to be visible from this far away. Then it came to her. The only casters powerful enough to do that were the princesses themselves, which meant that they were battling, just as Dash looked for Fluttershy. The teal mare bit her bottom lip as she realized just how small the amount of time she had left might turn out to be. If Celestia won, then everything would go back to normal, given a little time. If Nightmare Moon won, then, Dash thought, trying her best to imagine that Nightmare Moon would do once she reached power. She couldn't help but wonder if she would banish Celestia to the sun, or perhaps enslave the population of Equestria, dooming them forever to build colossal monuments to your eternal and everlasting glory, like Adolf Hitler or the Trotsky regime did when daring do. Rainbow Dash shook her head. Even now, those books couldn't stay out of her mind. As she thought about this, she looked up at the moon, and immediately, her face contorted in thought. Something had changed about it, but she wasn't sure what. But she couldn't quite place what it was. It just seemed different. She quickly turned her thoughts to Fluttershy once again, trying to envision what the shy little pony would be doing at this time. Then she had a horrible realization. Fluttershy probably left with Twilight, who was almost certainly on her way to aid the princess. Which meant... Oh no, Dash said aloud. Fluttershy was on her way to Canterlot, where the two rulers of godlike power were settling their differences like barbarians. She glared at the mountain as the purple flashes began to grow and expand. Rainbow Dash didn't know a whole lot about magic, but she did know that every unicorn had their own different color to their spells, and as she stared at the lights, she only saw one, a deep, ghostly lavender. She never really paid a whole lot of attention to the situation and details like that, but she was pretty sure that Celestia's aura wasn't purple. This only made her stomach flutter as she contemplated her next decision. Somewhere between here and that war zone was her last chance at a clear conscience, and Dash wasn't going to let it walk away. She began to fly towards the mountain, when suddenly the purple flashes began to brighten to blinding magnitudes. Dash had to turn her head away due to the sudden brightness of the lights, resulting in a complete loss of visibility, which nearly caused her to crash into the ground. When the lights finally faded, she stared in awed silence, watching the unbelievable sight before her. The beautiful city of Canterlot was sliding down the mountain, crumbling and collapsing as it tumbled down the rocky slope. Dash put her hooves to her mouth as she watched the capital of Equestria roll into a pile of broken architecture. Several large sections of the city split off before the entire mass disappeared into a colossal, amorphous cloud of dust. Dash was mortified. She had no idea that Nightmare Moon was that powerful, nor did she think that she would do something as extreme as destroy a city. Now, the Teal Pegasus wasn't so sure that looking for Fluttershy was such a good idea. What if Canterlot isn't the only city she destroyed? She began to worry in her head. What if Nightmare Moon was caught sight of me? She would kill me on the spot. She began to subconsciously hover backwards, her mind desperately trying to keep as much distance from the enemy as possible. But Dash merely shut her eyes and took a deep breath. I gotta do it. I gotta do it for Fluttershy. Two ponies, one dragon, and a Dragokins were only about a mile away when Canterlot came crashing down to the earth like a meteor. No one spoke. What could they possibly say? The capital had fallen, which meant Celestia had failed, and was probably dead. Fluttershy looked on as tears began to fall from her large blue eyes, and Spike merely gazed onto the wreckage, his brain trying to process the tragedy that played out before him. Applejack looked away, and even Discord had a face of sadness. "Twilight," Spike uttered. He knew that she and Trixie had traveled here to try and aid in the fight against Nightmare Moon, but now they had failed. Spike sat down and began to cry. He sobbed profusely as the one figure in his life that he could call a mother was presumed dead in the wreckage of Canterlot. The clear tears rolled down his purple scales beneath his eyes before falling from his cheek to the ground. His lovely white eyes were closed shut as he tried to imagine a life without Twilight, only to find that deep inside he was angry. The levity glowed white-hot inside of him, boiling deep in his soul, migrating to his head. Applejack looked over at Spike, who had stopped crying and began hyperventilating. "Spike, are you all right?" Spike hopped to his feet and turned to Discord, completely disregarding Applejack's question. "Teleport me, now!" The little baby dragon screamed at Discord. "What?" said Discord, in complete confusion, which was an emotion he rarely felt. "Teleport me up there!" He pointed to the cliff where Canterlot was once sitting. "You can't be serious," said Discord, with a sudden frown. "Did I stutter?" yelled the dragon at Discord. The mismatched being in front of the tiny purple dragon scowled at him before he raised his left lion paw, prepared to fulfill Spike's request. Applejack stepped forward and looked into Discord's eyes. "Don't you dare." Discord smirked mischievously before he snapped his fingers and disappeared abruptly, along with Spike. A few minutes earlier, high above the spot where Canterlot formerly resided, two ponies sat nestled discreetly in a nearly invisible cloud. Twilight had cast a spell on Trixie that allowed her to walk on the puffy cotton-like platform, which they both dyed black, to camouflage it against the sky. With a pair of binoculars, Twilight speculated the battles, watching Celestia get tricked by Nightmare, and seeing the city of Canterlot fall like an oversized stone into a puddle. Twilight felt depressed and mourned as she watched her teacher struggle helplessly against her sadistic sister. Not only that, but the city she lived just a few years ago sat in rubble a few hundred feet below. She wanted to cry, but she knew the tears would travel down her face and into the binoculars, so she forced herself not to shed any. She needed to be alert for when Nightmare Moon did it. There was one mistake that Twilight was betting on Nightmare Moon to make, and they could not miss it, no matter the cost. Trixie was watching the battle as well, from another section of the cloud, and for the entire course of the brawl, she had said next to nothing, when all of a sudden, she shrieked in despair. Trixie managed to say one word before Twilight began tearing over the side of the cloud. "Spike!" Suddenly, something grabbed hold of her tail and pulled her back up to the black mass of condensation. Twilight was desperately trying to fly down to the battle, just as she witnessed Spike teleport onto the cliff by himself, and from the look on his face, he was seeking revenge. The purple mare reeled around, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever was holding her, and she let out a gasp of surprise when she saw the god of chaos himself, where Trixie used to be. "Oh, no, you don't, you little maverick, you," said Discord with a mocking tone and a sly smile. "Discord, Spike's in trouble. Let me go." "No, he isn't. I have a plan, and I need you to listen." "Why should I listen to you?" She yelled back at him, momentarily stopping her struggle. "I don't have a reason to give you, Twilight. Just know that I'm on your side this time." Twilight sat back on her cloud, fidgeting and sweating, her nerves practically palpable. "You'd better be right," she said, through gritted teeth, before she practically stabbed the binoculars back into her eyes. The colors around Spike's warped and turned into a jabbled spiral, before rearranging themselves into a totally different view. He was now overlooking the edge of a cliff where Canterlot was previously fixed on the mountainside, and as he looked around he noticed a few strange things. Celestia was shackled to the ground, and it looked as if her horn was gone. Nightmare Moon was standing over the Sun Princess, seemingly talking to her, and Celestia could do nothing but listen. Her eyes were fixed on the moon in the sky, while Nightmare carried on her monologue. Discord was nowhere to be found, but Spike cared little for that. The absolute blinding hatred that had built up in his body was about to explode when he opened his mouth to speak. "Nightmare Moon, you black-hearted, cruel, and sick-minded bitch!" Nightmare Moon turned around, sheer surprise on her face, but it all turned to laughter when she witnessed the dragon that uttered those words of contempt. "I'm going to kill you, and I'm going to avenge Twilight," he said, the little purple dragon, as he stared daggers into Nightmare Moon's eyes. "Are you now?" said Nightmare Moon through a smile. "It seems a bit backwards, doesn't it? The dragon comes to slay me?" Nightmare Moon laughed uncontrollably. "The only thing keeping you alive is your bravery, dragon. But be forewarned, my amusement won't last long," is the only sentence she managed to sputter out before doubling over into another fit of ridiculing laughter. Spike began to walk slowly towards her as she laughed and gasped for breath. Just as Spike was a few feet away from Nightmare Moon, he wound up his arm and bared his claws. He jumped forward, using the momentum of the airtime to launch the palm of his hand into the blank cheek of the laughing villain. Nightmare Moon was caught completely off guard. Her eyes were open wide with shock as she felt the hard claws slam into her face before digging deep cuts into her skin. Spike's face was a hard scowl as he forced his sharp nails as deep as he could into her evil facade. The loud sound of a hard hand smacking against the flesh drew even Celestia's attention while it was fixated against the moon. And she turned, slack-jawed, towards the baby dragon. That day, Celestia would have found respect for the little dragon. Nightmare Moon stood up and towered over the little dragon, her eye twitching with anger and annoyance. She was going to kill this little purple nuisance. She was going to make sure he died as painful of a death as she could manage to administer, and she was going to make him wish he'd never hatched out of his wretched egg. Nightmare Moon stood on her hind legs and prepared to stomp on the little dragon, who only readied himself and clenched his fists. Suddenly, Nightmare Moon felt something touch her underbelly, before it pushed up on her, causing Nightmare to fall squarely on her back. She looked back, refusing to believe that the tiny dragon had managed to overpower her, but when she looked, she realized she was in much more trouble than that. Discord had emerged in front of Spike, with a smirk on his face and his finger on his lips, as if to say, "Oopsie." Discord looked over at Celestia, noticing the shackles fixed to her body. The God of Chaos couldn't help but smile as he spoke. "I'd ask you to join the fight, Celestia, but I see you're a bit tied up at the moment." A small drum set appeared overhead and played a loud string to punctuate his joke. Celestia looked at him, disappointed and disbelief written in her eyes. She spoke through a hoarse grunt. "You're making puns now?" Discord threw his hands in the air. "Puns are beside the point. I see your horn just doesn't get it." Another string of drums set above. "Here she comes!" yelled Spike, as Nightmare Moon charged at the two. "I wouldn't worry about her so much," said Discord with a wave of his hand. "You see, her mind's just a bit scrambled." Discord snapped his fingers and watched a puff of smoke engulf Nightmare Moon. She emerged from the cloud, only to have her limbs swapped with each other and rotated at strange angles, causing her to shuffle on her hooves before toppling over. She let out a scream of frustration as Discord laughed maniacally. I guess you could say it'll take a while for her to get back on her feet. The drum set exploded from above him and began to rain purple kittens. Discord was back rolling around, before Nightmare Moon used her magic to correct her limbs. Without Discord noticing, she launched a beam of back energy from her horn. Discord, watch out! Yelled Celestia, but it was too late. Discord turned towards Nightmare Moon, only to be zapped and engulfed in light. His figure stood incredibly still, and when the light dimmed, it was revealed that he had once again been imprisoned in stone. Celestia sincerely hoped this was another one of his games, because he was quite possibly the last person capable of ending this disaster. Everyone on the cliff looked at Discord's frozen body, waiting to see if it would show any signs of life underneath the rocky facade. When no such move was made, Nightmare Moon smiled a devilish grin. Now, it's just you and me, little dragon. All of the anger from Fike's face drained to show fear. After seeing what she did to Discord, he realized just who he was up against, and how hopeless the fight had been for him all along. He backed away from the black mare, who only strutted slowly towards him, smiling her evil beam every step of the way. Where's all your startling bravado now? Is it all because your pesky bodyguard was gone? You've taken to feeling vulnerable? Nightmare Moon was only a few yards away from Spike, who backed up as far as he could, until his foot almost stepped over the edge of the cliff. Nightmare Moon was now standing directly over him, her eyes fixed on the young dragon, thoughts of indescribable evil pulsing through her skull. A strong gust of wind tipped Spike over the edge of the cliff, who barely managed to grab hold of the edge with his claws. He began to try and desperately climb back up, but Nightmare Moon crushed his hands with her hooves before leaning in and putting her lips beside Spike's head. Long live the Queen, she muttered in his ear, before scooting his hands off the rock and sending him plummeting down to the lands below. The air rushed past his body, hissing against his ears and buffeting the small dragon on his journey to the ground. In his mind, he felt satisfied. He had done all he could do with his power, even though he had failed. He did his best, but there is little a baby dragon can do against the sheer evil of a jealous-driven alicorn. And in the end, he knew that he would die. On his way down, Spike spoke his final words to Twilight, whom he hoped was listening to him up from heaven. Thank you, he began. Thank you for making the little time I had on this earth worthwhile. I love you, Twilight. Have fun in the stars. He closed his eyes, let his body go limp, and calmly embraced his fate.